Good morning, everybody. Kit Cummings, Power of Peace Project. This morning I'm going to do the fourth installment on the nation divided and in turmoil. And the first week I did an overall view of the problem right after everything sparked off on that Friday night. And it resonated with people. There was, 12,000 views. The next week, I came and hit it from a young person's perspective and really tried to put myself in the place of a young person, a 21-year-old in 2020. And as a guy that's been around the sun a lot more times than they have, I don't know what I don't know. The next week, I hit it from more of a Black Lives Matter, NAACP perspective. And I talked about how I've got really strong connections on the left because of my work in 100 prisons with about 20,000 inmates over the past 10 years. I've been in those prisons hundreds of times. And because of that, the left embraced my work with at-risk youth and prison reform. And I've got some beautiful people that I consider fam on the left. But I also talked about my connection to the right. I was raised red, upper middle class, right here in the South. And those are my people, those are my roots. And so I've got dear family connections on the right side. And so today I want to talk about our men and women in blue. This one is, every week, man, I'm struggling with it. And there's a little fear and trembling as I throw out another side of these things. And so this morning, man, a guy talking about this, pray for your boy. But, I've got great relationships on that side too, because over the past 10 years, I've been working in schools and we pull in officers. I'm working with a police chief on a new book about these things, about procedural justice before all this popped off. And so I've got family, dear people on that side. And one I'll probably be talking about here in the next couple of weeks is the prison industrial complex. And I have seen abuses. I have seen brutality. Ain't nobody talking about that. We've made mass incarceration a multi-billion-dollar industry. And it works for those who are in charge, but that's another day. But today, I want to talk about good guys and bad guys. Take you back to when you were a kid. And I think, it's just like in our DNA or something. Doesn't matter the generation. But when kids play, it's like, man, I'm a good guy. You're a bad guy. Cops and robbers. It can be the cowboy in the white hat, cowboy in the black hat, cowboy in the brown hat. It's just, that's the way our nation has grown up. And I think in our history, you got good guys, no matter what color their hat is. You got bad guys. And now we're all grown up. And I've been working with the bad guys in the prisons for over 10 years. But you know what? I can't even figure that one out because a lot of the guys I thought were bad guys turn out to be good guys. And a lot of guys that look like good guys turn out to be bad guys. I know in my life, I've been a good guy and I've been a bad guy. And I know what I try to do, but hey, this is a crazy human problem. On Friday night, there was a beautiful event in downtown Marietta. My studio sits right on the square in Marietta. And so this has come to our front step. I mean, this whole nation's focus is right here on Georgia in 2 out of 3 of these big cases. And I know there's more cases, but a lot of the spotlight is going to be right here. And Friday night was a Juneteenth celebration. And now the nation is beginning to recognize that as a holiday, which I think is a fantastic thing, long time overdue. And it was a community event. It was a rally. It was a celebration. And as I approached, I walked out of my office across the square, big gathering. There were officers that were blocking off the streets and waving people through. I can't tell who's a good guy and who's a bad guy, so I treat them like good guys. Respect. And there was a lot of people doing that as they protected the event. Man, there was NAACP who was the host, and I'm a proud card-carrying member of the NAACP, and I even got a chance to speak at that event the other night because I was invited to. And if I get invited to share, I'm going to share. But in that crowd and on that stage were elected officials, got them all up there, white, black, and brown. There were people that were law enforcement. I'm talking about police chiefs and sheriffs. There were 3 newly elected judges that happened to be African-American females, and that was celebrated. There was a band, Black Lives Matter, marched in with signs, but there was you didn't feel any kind of vibe or hatred. For one beautiful moment, our city came together and celebrated the freedom that came in many ways to our brothers and sisters of more color. People weren't wearing hats. I mean, a lot of people that look like me can wear the black hat, and a lot of people that don't look like me wear the white hat. And even that terminology, white is good and black is, you got to see, this is systemic. And I just happen to be a brother of less color that's connected to each side of these things. But if I try to figure out that night on that beautiful event, I was so proud of my city. How in the world could I judge? Because all sides were there. Black Lives Matter were there. And then All Lives Matter were there. And Blue Lives Matter were there. And it was a beautiful celebration. But I know that that is not the vibe going on in our country right now. Because this one, I think there's beautiful things going on around the world that don't make the news. But you know what I feel. I'm always trying to live by the principles which I preach. Seek first to understand my opponent. Dr. King said that I need to understand my opponent's position better than they do. Find common ground with my adversary. Dr. King said there's much more that we have in common than what separates us. 3 is walk a mile in the shoes of your enemy. Before you judge, you might just find yourself in their story. Practice active listening and pause before responding, because you might just learn something from your opponent. Practice compassionate communication and use your influence for peace. If we spoke to our enemies, our adversaries, our opponents eloquently, passionately, with conviction and beautiful language like Dr. King did, maybe they'll listen. When I'm wrong, try to make it right. It's not a weakness to admit that you're wrong. As a matter of fact, you build credibility with your opponent. And lastly, treat your enemy with dignity and respect, especially when you disagree, because you leave the door open to future discussion and negotiation. I'm connected to all 3, and I'm being challenged to pick a side. This morning, I want to talk about my experience with men and women in blue. And we're going to keep hearing this phrase, systemic racism. It needs to be out front. And I think most people are starting to realize that this is a systemic problem, which means it affects the whole, not just the individual parts. And so this is a system that was created by people that look like me. Study your history. The Vikings were just taking over places. White Anglo-Saxon Europeans went out and colonized the world and set up this system for people that look like me. Now, you can get mad at that, or you can study your history. There's a reason why Mozambique speaks Portuguese. Why? Because that was the colonization of that country. So I think we would agree that it is a systemic problem, and it's much easier to deal with the root than the fruit. And I think what we're learning is over the decades and centuries, there have been times we've dealt with the fruit and we cut the fruit off and think that we've healed the tree, and we don't realize there's a poisonous root. That's the system. But here's my question. If it really is systemic and that's what you're preaching, then how in the world are we going to attack the individuals that are boots on the ground? I think about a 30,000 foot view, and I think about boots on the ground, 2 totally different perspectives. If I fly over the problem at 30,000 feet, I can see that overall, man, from God's viewpoint, can you imagine what this looks like? Man, it breaks his heart. I know that. Jesus wept over Jerusalem, and he said, how often have I wanted to gather you together like a mother hen gathers her chicks, but you were not willing. And I think that that's probably what God sees now. But it's a good fight. It's a struggle. I'm all about the struggle. I've been following Dr. King for 30 years. He captured my imagination when I was in college at University of Georgia, and I've never ever left him. So many of my principles I draw from that beautiful man. But where is his spirit today? If it's systemic, that means 30,000 feet. It is jacked up. It's time to change. The root is complex. And there's lots of discussions going on, conversations, legislation, appropriation. There's a battle going on. In a lot of ways, on both sides, light and darkness. This has been going on forever, but this is at the front and center, I believe, where it should be. But if it's systemic, what about the boots on the ground? Why are we attacking every individual? I'm not saying we, but we're seeing it on the news, attacking with vitriol and hatred anybody that wears that uniform and that badge. Why attack the individual if the root? Why hate the fruit when it's the root that we've got to change? And here's Roots, in case you know by him. So I want you to walk a mile with the other for a moment. I believe we ought to become the other. Paul said, I've become all things to all men in order that I might win some. And that beautiful evangelist, church builder, wrote half of the New Testament. He said, to the Greek, I became the Greek. To the Jew, I became the Jew. To the Gentile, I became the Gentile. And I believe if he were, walking through the streets today, he'd say, Black Lives Matter, I became Black Lives Matter. To law enforcement, I became law enforcement. To that mother who's praying for the young person on the street, I became her. And so not only Jesus, but Paul felt the other, saw the other, so that they could get one another. So I want you to imagine this morning a beautiful brother, a father of two. He's suiting up, getting ready to go back into the fray. He happens to be a black man. He's a good husband. He's a good father. He's doing his best, but he happens to be black. I want you to imagine the mother of two. This morning, she's suiting up. She's putting on that blue, and she's got her little kids. She's got to get them ready. She prayed with them last night and get them ready for whatever they have today. She can't be with them because they got to go protect and serve. She happens to be Hispanic, caught up in the middle of this thing. Imagine the young guy. He's straight out of the academy, and he's always dreamed of being a police officer. Since he was a little boy, I want to be a good guy. He was on the cop side, not the robber side, where he was a little boy. And so now he's fresh out of the academy and he's sent right into the fray. He ain't even got caught up in the system yet. He's just been through academy. And yet he's out there and he's dealing with his worst day straight out of boot camp. I want you to imagine the police chief. Maybe he's a veteran. Man, he's served a long career. He's looking at retirement. He's been accommodated. He's one of the good guys. And he happens to be white. He served his country. He protected the country. Whatever you think about foreign wars, this is a man who, he goes to church with a lot of people in this fight. What about him? He's suiting up today. What about the Black Lives Matter student, young lady, happens to be black. She's marching peacefully. She's finally found her voice. And now she gets to use it, and she gets caught up in the fray. And oh, by the way, her father is a police officer. And she's on those streets. And maybe her father's on some other streets. And she's got a right to have a voice. But that brother's got a right to go home. He's just trying to go home to his family. So it doesn't fit in the box. None of this does. It's 30,000 feet versus boots on the ground. And I think the root is poisonous, and we've got to heal the root. But the fruit, people get caught up in this. Man, how can we judge because of an outfit? I mean, we're fighting to not judge by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. That was Dr. King's dream. Well, then why am I allowed to judge by a color of a beautiful guy's clothes? And he wears a badge, and I go, oh, okay. I know I'm feeling some of that. Man, if I speak the other night, Friday night at the NAACP rally, he's one of them. But I'm on my way this morning to meet with the police chief, and we're going to talk about things we can do to bring kids and cops together like we do. We've got local police departments that are writing checks to the Power of Peace Project because they want to help. And so they adopt the local high school so that we can teach nonviolence. And we bring cops in and we get them to share about their lives. And the kids, they see a heart behind the badge. You know, we've had a high school football team 2 years in a row go out into a tough little neighborhood complex, apartment complex, and 12, 14 officers come out and cook 200 hot dogs. And these football players go out and they invite the whole community, set up all the little boys and girls that happen to be little brothers and sisters of more color. And then these rock star athletes, they speak to the young people about respecting authority. Man, that's what I've seen before all this mess happens. But now I want you to put your mind and your mind's eye in the officer that's suiting up this morning who's dealing with mental health issues. Man, he's depressed about this or has anxiety. And really, if you've ever dealt with that, it is hard to get up and go into the fray again. And I don't care if you're an accountant, but this brother's trying to go in there and he's got some mental health issues and he ain't doing good, but you can't see it. Maybe there's a brother or sister that's waking up this morning hungover because they have an addiction problem and nobody sees it. It could be drinking, could be prescription drugs. It could be whatever their thing is and it's out of control, but they got to get up the next day and go focus. Man, I've fought that battle. As a brother that's been in long-term recovery, it ain't easy to get up and go to work. I don't care if you're a mortgage banker, much less these officers. I want you to imagine the officer that's a veteran has fought overseas. I feel that too. Our oldest, 4 combat tours, 2 in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, a sniper. Man, he feels for his country, but he has served, and I feel him too. So let's imagine this officer that's a veteran and now is struggling with PTSD, and it's undiagnosed and it's untreated. And so, man, big crowds and sounds, it's already triggering things. Man, Fallujah. You can't see him, but he knows. What about a young sister that was raised by racist parents, and that's all she ever saw? And so that's her lens, not 30,000 feet, but boots on the ground. She sees things through the lens of her parents and makes decisions that maybe she shouldn't make. Maybe there's a bully, you know, that was always bullied whole life, decided, man, I'm going to be a cop, and takes out his frustration or her frustration on people because they have power, badge, and a gun. There's plenty of that too. But if you see that, the deacon who's suiting up, the mother of 2 who's suiting up, you know, the decorated chief who loves people is suiting up. But then the other side is, man, officers with addiction, depression, you know, racism in their family, maybe some abuse when they were young. Good guys and bad guys. Why don't we replace the terminology with healthy guys and sick guys? Man, that's the way God sees it. As far as I know, man, we're all right and we're all wrong. And the fruit is poison because of the root, but don't hate the fruit. Man, this is individuals, and we've got to start seeing people. So it's time today. Can you see the other? Can you respect them? Can you seek first to understand the officer? Can you find common ground with that brother or sister in blue? Can you walk a mile in their shoes before you make a judgment about what you hate and what you believe? Man, can you practice active listening? Are you willing to change your mind today? Can you see the officer that does not fit the mold? Today, can you speak compassionately? When you march, can you do it like Dr. King? You never see him cussing, taunting, or throwing rocks. And I believe that nonviolence is the answer. Man, if you're wrong, regardless of the position, can you admit it and make it right? That is not weakness. And can you treat the other with dignity and respect, especially when you disagree? These are the answers in my book. So I love my brothers and sisters in blue, and I pray for the ones that are sick and need help. I love my brothers and sisters of more color in the NAACP, and I realize that some of them maybe are sick and need some help, while some of them are heroes and better people than me. Man, I even feel for the gangster. And I miss my brothers behind the razor wire because I can't go and see them right now. But I know a lot of them are trying to change, and they maybe were bad guys. Now they're good guys. See the other, feel the other, so we can get the other. Today, I'm going to go meet with the police chief and talk about solutions. Later in the day, I'm going to meet with the other side and talk about solutions. Man, I want to get with the kids like I rallied on Friday night, talk about solutions. But I ain't going to pick a side. I'm going to pick an issue, a subject. I'm going to try to see this the best way I can, the way that the carpenter from Nazareth sees it, because I'm supposed to be like him. I love you, and so I'd love your comments. I'd love for you to share it if it resonates. Be a part of the solution today. Don't just be an expert on the problem, and don't shout so loud that nobody can hear you anymore, because what we do shouts so loud that sometimes nobody can hear our voice. Love you. Next week, we're going to tackle it from a different issue called the prison industrial complex. Much love. Be the change and the peace that you wish to see in the world. God bless.